The 9 wolf pups were supposed to die before sunrise. Locked inside a hunter's compound, starving, wounded, and trembling in the cold, they had no way out. Then a village healer named Elara slipped through the gates with nothing but a rusted knife, and risked her life to set every one of them free. She thought she was saving 9 helpless animals. She had no idea one of them carried the blood of a royal wolf. And she certainly didn't know that somewhere beyond the mountains, an alpha king was already following their scent. By noon, the hunter's compound would be nothing but ashes. And the man responsible would discover exactly what happens when you hurt what belongs to the most feared wolf king in the north. At dawn, she slipped through the hunter's gates with nothing but a rusted knife and a heart that refused to leave 9 crying wolf pups behind. She expected to die before reaching the forest. Instead, the pups followed her through the snow as if they had known her all their lives. But Elara never saw the enormous silver wolf watching from the ridge. By noon, the hunter's compound would be burning, and the creature she had unknowingly saved would return as the Alpha King. The first sound Elara heard was not the wind. It was crying. Thin, broken cries. They came from somewhere beyond the high wooden fence that surrounded the hunter's compound, rising and falling beneath the darkness like the whimpering of children trying not to be heard. Elara stopped on the narrow trail. Snow rested on the shoulders of her brown wool cloak. A cold wind moved through the blackpine trees, carrying the smell of pine resin, frozen earth, and smoke from distant chimneys. She turned toward the compound. The cries came again. 9 voices. She counted them without meaning to. 9. Her fingers tightened around the small leather satchel hanging at her side. Inside were dried herbs, bandages, a little bread, and a rusted knife she normally used to cut roots. It was not a weapon. It would never be enough against armed hunters. She knew that. Every sensible thought inside her told her to keep walking. The village of Belmere lay less than an hour away. By sunrise, the market would open. People would need medicine. An old farmer had been waiting for fever herbs. A child had burned his hand the previous evening. Elara could help them. She could not help wolves locked behind a hunter's wall. That was what reason said. Then another cry came. This one was weaker. Elara closed her eyes. For several seconds, she stood completely still while snow whispered against the trees. Then she stepped toward the compound. The hunters had built their camp in a clearing where the forest was thickest. Tall sharpened stakes surrounded the outer wall, and 2 watchtowers rose above the gate. A thin line of smoke came from the main building. No guards stood outside. The hunters were sleeping. Elara moved closer. Her boots sank into the snow. She waited. Nothing. She moved again. The crying became clearer. When she reached the rear wall, she found what she had hoped not to find. A narrow drainage gap ran beneath the fence. It was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Elara knelt. The snow was wet beneath her gloves. She looked toward the watchtower. Still empty. Then she lowered herself into the gap. Wood scraped against her cloak. Her breath caught as a nail tore the fabric near her shoulder. She kept moving. A moment later, she rolled into the compound. The smell hit her first. Blood. Old blood. Wet fur. Fear. Elara covered her mouth. Beyond a stack of crates stood a long iron enclosure. Inside it were 9 wolf pups. They were too young to be separated from their mother. Some had cuts around their paws. One had a swollen leg. Another had blood dried across its muzzle. They all went silent when they saw her. 9 pairs of eyes stared through the bars. Elara crouched. "It's all right," she whispered. The pups did not move. She slowly held out her hand. The smallest one crawled forward. Its body shook so violently that the iron floor beneath it trembled. Elara felt something inside her chest break. She looked at the lock. Then at the sleeping barracks. Then back at the pups. The lock was old. The knife was dull. But it was all she had. She pulled the rusted blade from her satchel and began working it into the mechanism. The metal scraped. Once. Twice. 3 times. Her hands became numb. The lock refused to move. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Elara froze. Nothing followed. She waited. Silence. Then she continued. The knife slipped. Her palm opened. A thin line of blood ran across her wrist. She ignored it. The smallest pup pressed its nose against her fingers. Just a little longer. The lock snapped. The gate opened. For one heartbeat, none of the pups moved. Then they rushed toward her. Elara nearly fell backward beneath their weight. One climbed onto her lap. Another buried its face beneath her cloak. Two stumbled around her boots. The injured pup remained behind. Elara reached through the opening and lifted it carefully. Its body was frighteningly light. She tucked it against her chest. Then she opened the gate completely. 9 pups. 9 lives. She turned toward the drainage gap. That was when the horn sounded. The entire compound came alive. A deep blast rolled through the darkness. Doors slammed open. Men shouted. Boots struck wooden steps. Elara's heart dropped. She grabbed the nearest pup. Run. She did not know if wolves could understand words. But somehow, they moved. She ran. 9 small bodies followed her toward the rear fence while the compound exploded into noise behind them. A lantern crashed. Someone shouted that the wolves were gone. Another voice screamed that the rear gate had been breached. Elara reached the wall. The pups hesitated. She pushed the smallest through first. Then another. Then another. She crawled into the snow after them. Behind her, a hunter appeared at the corner of the building. He saw her. Their eyes met. Elara ran. She did not look back. Because the Blackpine forest was only 50 paces away. And behind her, men were already loading their crossbows. The forest swallowed Elara and the pups almost instantly. Dark pine branches closed overhead. Snow covered the ground so deeply that every step became a struggle. Elara ran until her lungs burned. Behind her, hunters crashed through the trees. Find them. Check the ridge. They couldn't have gone far. She held one pup against her chest while the other 8 struggled through the snow behind her. The little animals were exhausted. They stumbled. Fell. Rose again. Elara kept looking back. Every time one stopped, she stopped too. The first time, she lifted a black and white pup beneath its belly and carried it until it found its strength again. The second time, she crouched and cleared snow from another pup's face. The third time, she realized she was crying. She wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Come on. Her voice shook. We're almost there. She knew they were not. The hunters were getting closer. Branches snapped behind them. Elara turned toward a cluster of ancient cedars and spotted a hollow between the roots of one enormous tree. She pushed the pups inside. Then she crawled in after them. The space was cramped and dark. 9 frightened bodies pressed against her. Elara covered the smallest pup with her cloak. Footsteps approached. Slow. Heavy. Very close. She stopped breathing. Through the roots, she saw boots moving through the snow. One hunter stopped. Another passed him. They came this way. Then where are they? Keep searching. A branch cracked. Elara closed her eyes. The pup against her chest trembled. She placed one hand over its tiny body. The hunter stepped closer. Closer. Then a distant howl rose from somewhere deeper in the forest. The men turned. What was that? Another howl answered. The hunters exchanged uneasy looks. Forget the animals. Search the eastern trail. Their footsteps faded. Elara remained still for a long time. Only when the forest became quiet again did she breathe. She looked down at the pup in her arms. Its fur was pale silver. Almost white. There was a strange mark near its shoulder. A crescent shape. Elara gently moved the fur aside. Something black hung around its neck. A small stone. She touched it. The pup flinched. Elara examined the stone in the dim light. A symbol had been carved into it. A crescent moon surrounded by 3 sharp lines. She had seen that symbol before. Not on a wolf. On an old stone marker deep in the northern mountains. The Moonfang crest. A story came back to her. Her grandmother had told it when Elara was a child. The Moonfang wolves were said to be descended from an ancient royal line that ruled the northern forests long before human kings built their castles. Most people believed the stories were legends. Elara had never believed them. Until now. She looked at the pup. "Who are you?" The little creature blinked. Then it pressed its nose into her palm. Elara heard movement outside. She immediately pulled her cloak tighter. But it was not a hunter. One of the other pups had crawled from beneath the roots. Elara smiled faintly. She fed them the last pieces of bread from her satchel. It was not enough. But the pups ate. After some time, the forest became lighter. Morning had arrived. Elara knew she had to move. She remembered an abandoned shepherd's cabin farther east. It had not been used in years. If she could reach it, she could tend the injured pups. She stood. The pups followed. The silver-marked one struggled. Elara picked it up. The others moved around her feet. Together, they crossed the forest. The cabin appeared just before noon. Its roof sagged. Its windows were broken. But it had 4 walls. That was enough. Elara built a small fire and warmed water over a cracked iron pot. She cleaned the wounds on the pups one by one. The silver pup resisted. It growled weakly. Elara smiled. "You can be angry with me later." She wrapped its injured paw. For the first time, its head rested against her wrist. Elara sat beside the fire. For a few precious minutes, there was peace. Then every pup stopped moving. Elara looked up. The cabin became silent. Not ordinary silence. The kind of silence that arrives when animals sense something humans cannot. The silver pup raised its head. Its ears pointed toward the mountains. Then it howled. One small, trembling cry. Far away, something answered. The sound rolled between the peaks. Deep. Powerful. Ancient. Elara slowly stood. She looked toward the broken window. Nothing moved among the trees. But somewhere beyond the mountains, something had heard the pups calling. And it was coming. The hunters found the cabin before mid-morning. Elara knew because the first arrow struck the door. Wood splintered. The pups scattered. A second arrow buried itself in the wall. "Out!" someone shouted. Elara grabbed the silver-marked pup. The other 8 rushed toward the rear of the cabin. She kicked open the back door. Snow poured inside. "Run!" The pups disappeared into the trees. Elara followed. Arrows cut through the branches behind her. She ran toward the ravine. The ground dropped sharply there, creating a narrow passage between 2 walls of stone. It was dangerous. But the hunters could not easily follow. Elara entered. The pups scrambled ahead. The silver pup struggled in her arms. Its breathing was shallow. She could feel each tiny heartbeat through her coat. "Stay with me." A man appeared above the ravine. Garrick. Elara had seen him earlier at the compound. He was broad-shouldered, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheek. He smiled when he saw her. "You've made this very expensive." Elara backed away. Garrick climbed down. "Give me the pups." "No." His smile disappeared. "You don't understand what you've stolen." Elara tightened her arms around the silver pup. "I know what I saw." "You saw animals." "I saw living creatures." His eyes hardened. "They belong to the Northern Crown." Elara stared at him. "What?" Garrick said nothing. That silence told her enough. The pups were important. More important than she had imagined. He reached for her. Elara stepped backward. Her heel struck a stone. She almost fell. Garrick moved quickly. She threw herself sideways. His hand caught the edge of her cloak. The fabric tore. Elara escaped. But the movement cost her. Pain shot through her ankle. She fell against the ravine wall. The silver pup slipped from her arms. She caught it before it struck the ground. Behind her, the other 8 pups had disappeared. Elara looked toward the trees. They were gone. Safe. That was enough. She turned back to Garrick. He was coming toward her. "You won't tell me where they went." Elara said nothing. He grabbed her arm. She fought. He struck her across the shoulder. She fell into the snow. The silver pup crawled against her chest. Garrick reached for it. Elara covered the animal with her body. Take me. His hand stopped. What? Take me. She stared at him. You won't touch it. Garrick laughed quietly. You think this changes anything? No. Elara's fingers curled into the snow. But it gives them time. Something moved above the ravine. Garrick looked up. A wolf stood on the ridge. Then another appeared. Then another. Elara slowly turned. More wolves emerged from the trees. Dozens. They did not growl. They did not advance. They simply watched. Garrick's face changed. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. Elara heard a deep breath behind the wolves. A massive silver-grey wolf stepped forward. He was larger than any wolf she had ever seen. His coat shimmered pale beneath the morning light. His shoulders were broad. His head was high. And his eyes were not the eyes of an animal. They were intelligent, ancient, furious. The entire pack lowered their heads. Garrick stepped backward. No. The great wolf descended into the ravine. Elara remained still. The wolf approached her. He stopped beside the silver pup. For several seconds, neither moved. Then he lowered his head. He smelled the pup. The tiny creature lifted its face. A soft sound escaped its throat. The great wolf closed his eyes. Something passed across his face that looked almost like grief. Then he looked at Elara. She expected anger. Instead, he studied the blood on her hands. The torn cloak. The bruised shoulder. The pup she had protected. He turned toward the hunters. A low growl rolled through the ravine. Every wolf answered. Garrick ran. He climbed the opposite side and disappeared into the forest. The pack did not chase him. The great wolf remained beside Elara. Then, very gently, he took the silver pup by the scruff and carried it away. Elara watched him go. The remaining wolves formed a circle around her. For the first time since dawn, she felt safe. But she did not know yet that the wolf she had just met was not merely the leader of the pack. He was King Kaelen. And the pups she had rescued were the last surviving heirs of his bloodline. Kaelen had not trusted a human in years. Not after his family was murdered. Not after the northern packs were betrayed. Not after the royal pups vanished one by one. For months, he had followed rumors through forests and villages, finding broken cages, dead wolves, and empty trails. Every clue led to the same name. Garrick. But there had never been proof. Until Elara found it. She did not know any of this as Kaelen carried the injured pup toward the waiting pack. She only knew that the enormous wolf had taken the smallest creature from her arms. She feared he would hurt it. Then he placed the pup beside another wolf. A female with silver fur. The wolf immediately began licking the pup's wounds. Elara's shoulders relaxed. Kaelen turned back toward her. She stood slowly. Her ankle hurt. Blood ran down one side of her face. Kaelen watched her. Then he stepped closer. Elara did not move. The wolf's breath warmed the air between them. His eyes held hers. She lifted her hand. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she touched his forehead. His ears shifted. The pack became completely still. Elara's fingers rested against his fur. You were looking for them. Kaelen stared at her. She did not know why she spoke to him as if he could understand. Perhaps some creatures simply carried silence differently. The great wolf turned his head toward the mountain. Then he looked at the black stone hanging from the pup's neck. Elara followed his gaze. The hunters knew what it was. Kaelen's eyes hardened. She understood nothing about wolves and kings, but she understood grief. And there was grief in him. Deep enough to make the forest feel cold. Kaelen shifted. The change happened beneath the trees. Silver fur became skin. The enormous wolf became a tall man wearing a dark cloak. Elara stepped backward. Her breath caught. He was scarred across one shoulder, his black hair falling over his forehead, his expression controlled but filled with an exhaustion that seemed older than the mountains. He looked at her. I am Kaelen. Elara stared. The Alpha King. She understood. The stories. The Moonfang King. The ancient bloodline. The wolves. Everything fell into place. Kaelen looked toward the pups. They are my family. His voice was quiet. Elara swallowed. They were going to kill them. I know. He looked back at her. You saved them. Elara shook her head. I only opened a cage. Kaelen's expression changed. You opened a cage knowing you might not leave it alive. Elara had no answer. Before she could speak, a howl came from the western ridge. Kaelen turned. One of his wolves had returned. The wolf circled him once, then looked toward the forest where Garrick had escaped. Kaelen understood. The compound. Elara looked at him. What? Garrick is going back. Kaelen's eyes became cold. He will destroy the evidence. Elara remembered the compound. The cages. The records. The chains. The black stone. If he burns everything, no one will believe what happened. Kaelen nodded. He looked at the injured pup. Then at Elara. Stay with them. She frowned. I'm coming. No, I'm coming. His eyes narrowed. You've already risked enough. Elara looked toward the pups. So have they. For a moment, Kaelen said nothing. Then something almost like respect entered his face. He turned toward the mountain. The pack moved with him. Elara followed. The journey back was silent. Snow began falling again. The pups traveled between the wolves. Kaelen walked ahead. But every few minutes, he looked back. Not at the wolves. At Elara. By the time the trees thinned, smoke was rising above the compound. Garrick had arrived first. The hunters were burning their own buildings. Kaelen stopped. His entire pack stopped behind him. Elara saw the flames reflecting in his eyes. The king stood motionless. Then he stepped forward. And every wolf followed. The hunters saw the wolves first. Then they saw the king. Panic spread through the compound. Men ran toward the gates. They slammed wooden beams into place. Others threw oil onto the remaining records. Garrick stood in the center of the courtyard. He watched Kaelen approach. For years, he had hunted wolves. For years, he had believed fear belonged to the animals. Now he understood that fear had simply been waiting for the right creature to return. Kaelen stopped outside the gates. The snow around him was untouched. His wolves stood behind him in perfect silence. Elara remained farther back, holding the smallest pup beneath her cloak. Kaelen raised one hand. The pack moved. The gate shattered. The sound rolled across the valley. Wood exploded inward. The hunters scattered. No wolf attacked blindly. They moved with purpose, cutting off every escape. Kaelen entered the courtyard. Garrick backed away. You don't understand, he said. Kaelen kept walking. You were supposed to be dead. Kaelen stopped. My family was. Garrick swallowed. The nobles paid us. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. Names. Garrick looked toward the burning building. Then toward the forest. He suddenly ran. Kaelen did not chase him. Elara did. Not far. Only toward the side of the compound where she had noticed something strange earlier. A section of floor had been covered with fresh boards. She pulled at them. One broke. Beneath it was a stairway. Kaelen. He came immediately. Together, they descended. The cellar was larger than the building above suggested. Chains hung from the walls. Iron collars lay scattered across the floor. There were maps. Stacks of letters. Lists of payments. Names. Dates. Kingdoms. Elara picked up one parchment. Her face went pale. These aren't only hunters. Kaelen took it. The seal at the bottom belonged to a noble house from the Western Kingdom. Another letter carried a different seal. Then another. The hunting compound was not a small operation. It was part of a network. Someone had been paying Garrick to capture Moonfang wolves. And someone had known exactly which pups mattered. Kaelen's jaw tightened. They wanted the bloodline. Elara looked at him. Why? Kaelen's eyes remained on the papers. The Moonfang bloodline carries the old bond. The bond. The wolves of the northern mountains recognize only one true king. He looked toward the silver-marked pup. If they killed every heir, the kingdom could be controlled by whoever possessed the royal crest. Elara looked at the little creature. She suddenly understood why Garrick had been willing to burn everything. The pup was not merely valuable. It was proof. A future king. Kaelen gathered the records. We take these to the kingdoms. A scream came from above. Elara froze. Kaelen turned. They rushed upstairs. Garrick stood in the courtyard. He had escaped his guards. A knife was pressed against Elara's throat. She had barely noticed him move. The silver pup was at her feet. Garrick looked at Kaelen. One step closer. Kaelen stopped. Every wolf froze. Elara could feel Garrick's breathing behind her. The knife trembled. Not from fear. From rage. You ruined everything. Elara stared ahead. Her heart hammered. Kaelen's eyes never left Garrick. Let her go. Garrick laughed. You think she matters? Kaelen's voice became quieter. She matters because she chose what you never could. Garrick pressed the blade closer. Elara closed her eyes. Then she felt something small touch her boot. The silver pup. It moved forward. Slowly. Garrick looked down. His attention shifted for only a second. The pup stepped between them. Its tiny body trembled. But it did not move away. Garrick raised the knife. Kaelen's face changed. The entire pack moved at once. Garrick stumbled backward. Elara dropped beneath his arm. Kaelen crossed the courtyard in a heartbeat. Garrick fell. The knife struck the snow. Silence followed. The king stood over him. He could have killed him. Everyone knew it. But Kaelen looked toward the burning records. Then toward Elara. Alive. The wolves surrounded Garrick. The fire continued behind them. And as the sun climbed toward its highest point, Kaelen looked at the compound where so many creatures had suffered. His expression became utterly still. Then he gave one order. Burn it. The flames rose higher. Before noon, the hunter's compound was gone. By noon, the compound had become a blackened skeleton. The wooden walls had collapsed. The cages were broken. The iron bars lay twisted in the snow. Smoke drifted between the pine trees, turning the sunlight pale. Elara stood at the edge of the clearing. 9 pups slept beneath the watch of the Moonfang pack. The smallest rested against the silver female who had found it earlier. For the first time, its breathing was steady. Elara crouched beside it. She touched its head. The pup opened one eye. Then closed it again. A small smile appeared on her face. Behind her, Kaelen approached. He had changed back into his human form. He stopped several steps away. Elara looked at him. Is it over? Kaelen looked at the ruins. The compound is. His gaze moved to the evidence secured inside his cloak. But what happened here will not be forgotten. Elara nodded. She had expected anger from him. Instead, she saw something different. Resolve. The records would be taken to the kingdoms. The nobles who had paid Garrick would be exposed. The hunters who had followed him would stand trial. The Moonfang bloodline would survive. But Elara still felt a strange sadness. She looked at the ruined compound. So many animals died here. Kaelen stood beside her. Yes. He looked at the broken cages. That is why I will remember it. The wind moved through the trees. Snow began falling again. Softly. Almost gently. Elara looked toward the road leading back to Belmere. She had a village waiting for her. Patience. Her small home. Her old wooden table. The life she had known before dawn. I should go home. Kaelen was silent. Then he said, You can. Elara looked at him. You aren't going to stop me. No. There was no command in his voice. No royal demand. Only certainty. You risked your life for creatures that could never repay you, he said. I will not become another person who takes something from you. Something tightened inside Elara's chest. She looked away. The words were simple. But they mattered. Kaelen looked toward the pups. They need a healer. Elara smiled faintly. They need a mother. They have a pack. She looked at the 9 little faces sleeping together. Then back at him. And what does the pack need? Kaelen's eyes met hers. Someone who remembers what they were before they became symbols. Elara understood. He was offering her a place. Not as a servant. Not as a prisoner. Not as a reward. As someone trusted. Weeks later, Elara entered the Moonfang kingdom. It lay beyond the northern mountains, hidden between white peaks and forests of ancient pine. The kingdom did not resemble the castle she had imagined. There were no golden towers. No endless walls. Instead, stone halls were built into the mountainside, connected by wooden bridges and narrow paths. Smoke rose from warm chimneys. Children ran through the courtyards. Wolves slept beside doorways. Hunters carried baskets of meat instead of weapons. Everywhere Elara looked, humans and wolves moved through the kingdom together. The first evening, she sat beside a great fire and treated an old wolf's injured paw. The animal watched her carefully. When she finished, it rested its head against her knee. Elara smiled. Kaelen watched from across the hall. He said nothing. He did not need to. Months passed. The 9 pups grew stronger. The silver-marked pup became the boldest of them all. It followed Elara everywhere. Through the gardens. Along the mountain paths. Into the healing hall. It even slept outside her door. Elara named it Ash. Not because of the color of its fur. Because it had survived what should have destroyed it. One morning, she carried herbs through the same forest where she had once run from hunters. The trees were green now. The snow had melted. Sunlight spilled through the branches. Ash ran ahead. The other pups chased him. Their paws struck the earth with soft rhythmic sounds. Elara laughed. The sound surprised her. She had not realized how long it had been since she had laughed freely. A howl came from the ridge. Ash stopped. Elara looked up. Kaelen stood between the trees in his wolf form. Silver fur. Golden eyes. The same enormous creature she had first seen on the day everything changed. Ash ran toward him. The king lowered his head. The pup pressed against his chest. Then Kaelen looked toward Elara. She smiled. He turned and began walking along the ridge. Elara followed. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. At the top of the ridge, the entire valley opened beneath them. The Moonfang kingdom glowed in the afternoon sun. Smoke rose from chimneys. Wolves moved through the fields. Children played beside the stream. The 9 pups ran through the grass. Elara stood quietly beside Kaelen. She remembered the first morning. The cold. The cages. The blood. The fear. She remembered thinking that one person could not change anything. She had been wrong. She had not defeated the hunters with a sword. She had not commanded an army. She had simply heard something crying in the darkness and refused to walk away. Kaelen looked at her. You saved my kingdom. Elara shook her head. I saved 9 pups. He looked toward the valley. Sometimes that is how kingdoms are saved. The wind moved through the grass. Ash came running back and dropped a small branch at Elara's feet. She laughed again. She picked it up and threw it. The pup raced after it. One by one, the others followed. Kaelen watched them. Then he looked at Elara. There was no throne between them. No command. No debt. Only trust. And somewhere far beyond the mountains, the kingdoms would soon learn the truth about the hunters, the stolen royal bloodline, and the woman who had walked into a compound alone before sunrise. But in the Moonfang Valley, the story was remembered more simply. 9 pups had cried. One woman had listened. And before the sun reached noon, a king had answered. Years later, when children asked Elara why the Moonfang king trusted humans again, she never spoke about the fire or the broken cages. She would take them to the ridge. She would point toward the forest. And she would tell them to listen. Because sometimes the greatest turning points in history did not begin with armies. They began with a quiet sound in the darkness. A frightened heartbeat. A tiny cry behind an iron gate. And one person brave enough to answer it.